Hello everyone, my name is Rich Aguilera and thank you for joining me for this half hour to talk about ministering to kids. What an important job. If you have signed on for being a minister of children, whether it's in, Sabbath School or as a children's ministry director at the conference level, at the church level, in any way or shape or form, you are committed to reaching and teaching kids. The job is hard. And even now with the pandemic and, still kind of going, dragging along, it still is hard. So I've been asked to spend this little time sharing some of the ideas and things that we've implemented over the years to help to see if there's some ideas that I can share to encourage, to motivate you to keep doing what you are doing. So first of all, it doesn't surprise anybody to admit that we live in a world that is just going so fast. I mean, compared to 20 years ago or something like that, this world seems like it's just spinning out of control. Everything is happening so fast, and a lot of parents don't even know what's going on or aren't even actively involved in raising their children. Here's this funny comic strip that I saw once. As you can see in the caption there, it says, "Your mother and I are feeling overwhelmed. You'll have to bring yourselves up." And of course, probably a lot of us can resonate with that because it seems like nowadays, who's raising our kids? In many households, it's the computer or an iPad or whatever device. That seems to be where a lot of kids are spending a lot of time and is consuming their energy. Of course, there's video games, and this can also be a very time-consuming thing, and in pretty much most cases, it's not something that is really even drawing them closer to God, especially a lot of these games that are out there now that are very violent, a lot of role-playing where of course they're not out there shooting or killing anybody, but they're role-playing these things, which of course can lead down a very dangerous path. In general, too, if you've been around long enough, it seems like kids in general just are less respectful of parents, of elderly folks. And this is a trend that seems to be going in the wrong direction. What are we doing wrong? And all of this obviously points to the idea that it's getting harder and harder to minister to kids. More than anything, we want kids to love God, to love Jesus, to commit their lives to serving Him, especially as they grow older and, of course, eventually as an adult, to live out their lives living for God, honoring God, loving His Word. How do we do this? This is a tough environment that we live in. I mean, think about it. Look around. Think about just the Christmas holiday. The Christmas holiday, of course, is a celebration of Jesus' birth. It doesn't mean He was born on the 25th, but it is a celebration of Jesus' birth. But you go out to the secular world now and you mention Christmas, what are people going to think of? They're going to think of Santa Claus. They're going to think of reindeer. They're going to think of, how many presents they're going to get under that tree or whatever. Interesting how the enemy works, how he's taken something that has to do with God and he's twisted it. This is how he works. And if you'll notice, he's targeting children. What about Easter? Easter, of course, is to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. But again, you go out there into the general public and Easter is about rabbits and eating those marshmallow peeps and finding candy. What's going on? Even Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is a holiday here in North America that is about being thankful to God for His protection, for His guidance. Yet here in North America and increasingly everywhere in the world, it's about eating turkey, watching sports or football on TV, and of course, Black Friday, which now starts on Thursday nights. It's a shopping frenzy. Where's God? Have you noticed how God is being systematically taken out of everything? And a lot of these things target families and target kids. When you watch TV or look at advertisements, wherever they go, things that are known to be hurtful to us, like drinking or drugs or smoking, has all gotten this spin of being something good, being something cool. Even in our public schools, you'll notice that it is pretty much mandatory now to teach evolution, and teaching creation is practically outlawed. Of course, when you look at movies, when you go to museums, it's the same concept of a world that evolved over billions of years, that there is no God, that everything is on this kind of random trajectory. God is systematically being taken out of everything that our kids look at. You think this is just accidental? Not at all. This is by design of the enemy, which means we have to step up and take this very seriously. For those of you that know me, you know that I've committed my life to this. I studied as an architect, and I did that for 15, 16 years, and about 10 or 12 years ago, I committed to doing ministry for children full time. So how? Where? What do we do to properly teach kids to fall in love with God and to see the world from a biblical point of view? These are great questions. Now, of course, the first, an obvious answer is that we have to teach our kids and parents to do this at home. That has to be the very first place that we start. But of course, there are other places that make sense as well. Of course, the other very obvious place is at church. I'd like to say school, but I know that not everybody, as a matter of fact, the great majority of families are not able to send their kids to a church school, which means they're going to a public school. And of course, in public school, they're not teaching godly values. So church is one of our big spots where we can teach kids these values. Of course, there's Sabbath morning worship, which unfortunately, in many and most cases, is not very child-friendly. Of course, if you're a pastor or a leader in that setting, I would love to encourage you to think of ways to integrate kids more into the worship service time. The second, of course, obvious area that we can reach kids in church is Sabbath School. It's a whole hour there that we can really focus and concentrate on kids. This is the golden hour. We really have to do a lot and just really have our A game on during Sabbath School. Then, of course, there's some of these other peripheral moments. For example, Vacation Bible School, which unfortunately just happens during the summer for the most part. But it is a great, awesome week that kids can really dive in, get excited. Leaders are creative. They're reaching the community. Great opportunity also to minister to kids. A fourth idea is children's church. I know not a whole lot of churches do children's church. And of course, with the pandemic on, even less easier to be able to do something like that. But I'd like to challenge you to think beyond the edges of the pandemic when things start to return into normal. Children's church is another great opportunity to minister to kids. We've done children's church in our community for close to 20 years. We do it on Sabbath afternoons at 4 o'clock, and we invite the entire community to come and attend. So it is more of an outreach evangelism approach. Now, these four settings are kind of the church-related areas that we are able to connect with our kids. So what do? How do we reach them? We do know that kids today just kind of struggle to just sit and listen. Kids today don't learn the same way they did when we were kids. It's different now. So instead of trying to force kids to adapt to the way that we learn, we need to tighten up our pants and go out there and figure out how to adapt ourselves to teaching in a way that they can learn better. And I know this is kind of hard for a lot of folks. Older folks also struggle seeing how we can do this. And of course, I don't have to mention what's at stake here. Because if you look at the statistics that are out there nowadays, they're quite terrifying. Different studies are showing that up to 70% of our kids are leaving the church. That's kind of terrifying. And the critical age is 13. Meaning if you do not have them convicted by 13, when they're 14, 15, 16, 17, they're already gone. They're just waiting for the opportunity to leave. So the clutch age is 12, 13. We have to have won them by that age, which is why I focused pretty much all of my attention on reaching kids. We have to lock them in, have them fall in love with God, with Jesus, committed to the Bible at the early age. I'm not trying to discount in any way youth ministries or young adult ministries, but based on these statistics, the best method for retaining these kids is by winning them when they're kids, which means we cannot afford to ignore them when they're kids. And believe me, it's sad that I've been to how many churches where the kids are pretty much ignored, very little priority is placed on them. And I'm not trying to put too much pressure on a lot of you church leaders and pastors out there, but how much kids are important is reflected by your budget. If you have a budget of 1% or less, children are not a priority at your church, and I challenge you to rethink winning these kids so that they are locked in all the way through their childhood into adulthood. Make the effort. A lot of pastors don't even realize that one of the easiest ways to grow your church is in simply maintaining the kids. 70% won't leave. So I'm not here to preach at you guys. You guys know how this works. I'm just here to encourage you guys. I'm also here to talk about the how. How do we do this? So There's a lot of ideas and tips that I'd like to share with you. I don't have the time to go through all of them in just half an hour, which is why I wrote a book, and I encourage you guys to get the book. It's called 21 Tools to Teach Kids About Jesus. I wrote this after the pandemic started because it was getting harder to travel around. I would go around doing these seminars, but now just you can get the book and read it. 21 Tools is available at my website, which is uniquechristiantoys.com. You can also find it, I believe, at pretty much most of the ABCs, at least in North America, and also at the Pacific Press, ABC websites. Buy it online. But I'm going to go through as many of the points as I can in the time that we have given, and we'll just kind of go from there. So first tip and idea that I'd like to suggest for all you leaders out there is the 5 senses. God gave us 5 senses, but unfortunately, for the most part, only 2, maybe 1 or 2 are used, generally speaking, for teaching kids. Remember, each sense is a pathway into their brain. So if you're only using 1 or 2, by meaning visual or listening, which are the typical ones, you're not tapping into as many avenues as possible. I want to encourage you guys to tap into as many as you can. Believe it or not, you can actually teach kids by having them touch things, by having them taste things, by having them, use all their senses. When we would do children's church, we'd have these ideas where the kids would dress up and they would bake and they would touch things and they would push buttons and, get all the senses involved in teaching them. This is a huge way of engaging them in every sense possible. And think about it. The more senses that you use to engage the kids, the more they'll remember. And of course, at the end of the day, this is the main goal, is for us to have our kids remember what we're trying to teach them, the basic ideas, the concepts of teaching, the stories in the Bible, right? The second tool that I'd like to bring up is creativity. Now, I understand that not everybody has been blessed with super creative genes, and that's okay. For the folks that have been, then go to town with your creativity. Don't let anybody slow you down or stop you. And for those of you that maybe have not been blessed with so much of the creative genes, that's okay. There are so many resources out there that you can look up, read, study, buy, whatever, to tap into ideas for engaging the kids at a creative level. For example, a lot of you guys know that I've been traveling around the world for years teaching about the creation issue, about evolution, about dinosaurs, all these topics. I use as many creative ideas as possible. And, a lot of Sabbath School leaders once in a while ask me, how do we make for example, the days of creation something memorable and easy to teach and so that the kids won't forget? Here's an idea of something that we've taught and implemented and used all over the place, and it's very simple and easy to use. So first thing, get yourself a white paper plate and draw a circle around the edge. Of course, this is with the kids. They can do this as you are teaching them. And then draw 3 lines which divide up your plate into thirds. Now in that first one at the top, draw a 1. On the second one to the right, draw a 2, and then the next one a 3. So you're going to teach about day 1, day 2, and day 3 on this plate. Now, going back to the pie there on day 1, you're going to draw in a circle, and it's going to be the earth, just kind of crude and raw as it was when God started creating. You could talk about it, that this is what was there and what happened on day 1. Day 2, of course, then you can go and draw the clouds and that water surface where, God went and created and divided the atmosphere and all that. Then in the third pie shape there, you can draw, the land, the line where the dirt is, and draw some trees and some bushes and some grass. Because on the third day, all these plants came to life. Now here's the exciting part. Change your marker or crayon color, and we're going to go to days 4, 5, and 6, which actually take place on the same pie shapes as 1, 2, and 3. So where 1 is, you're also going to draw a 4. And where 2 is, you're going to draw a 5. And where 6 is, or 3 is, you're going to draw a 6. We go back to pie shape number 1, and now on the 4th day, of course, God created all the lights in the sky. So we're also going to draw the sun and stars and the moon in that same pie triangle. And then you're going to go over to the second one. And of course, on the 5th day, God created all the creatures that live in the sea and all the creatures that fly in the sky. So draw the birds and draw the fish under the water, of course, and the birds in the sky. And then on the last one, we draw in on the land, all the land animals. It could be, the monkeys on the trees, an elephant or whatever. And of course, our people, which God created, of course, Adam and Eve on that 6th day. And of course, to cap it off, I like to write on the top the 7th-day Sabbath to cover all of God's awesome creation. And they have a great reminder, easy to remember, 1, 2, 3, and then you go around again, 4, 5, 6 with a different color. And they're drawing, they're listening while you're talking and you're teaching. Hard to forget when you use a system like this. Again, this is just a simple idea of something you can do to teach one simple basic concept. Look for ways. The internet is huge. Find ways that you can find creative methods to teach simple concepts that kids will understand, ideally using, the hands-on 5 senses approach, and it will be a very effective method for teaching kids. A third tool that we can talk about is curiosity. Kids are naturally curious. Oh man, it doesn't matter what you show them. If there's some curiosity factor in there, their attention is focused. For example, as I travel around the world doing events, if you've been to one of my events, you probably noticed that even right on the advertising posters and stuff, there's almost always a pair of 3D glasses, because at my events, especially the dinosaur event that I would tour around, not so much right now until this is all over with, 3D glasses are a part, meaning I go and we do these events and I hand out hundreds, thousands of pairs of 3D glasses, because I tell the kids, I tell them on the poster and the promos and the teasers, you will get a pair of 3D glasses. You will need a pair of 3D glasses at my events. I mean, think about it. If you just leave it at that, wow, what is Mr. Rich gonna do? He's gonna have 3D glasses. We're gonna have to wear 3D glasses. Again, pique their curiosity. Tell them next week, we're gonna have 3D glasses. Are you gonna miss out? No kid is gonna miss out on that one. So think about ways that you can pique their curiosity. Teasers, that's why the world has teaser trailers, right? We're just giving them a little information, getting them curious about what will happen next. This will get their attention, get them to come back, get them to be thinking about it all week, and of course be excited when the time comes. Another tool that I'd like to mention is surprises. Kids love surprises. I mean, just think about it, open the door, surprise! Kids love surprises. Here's an example. We did children's church once a few years ago, and it was a time machine set. And we basically built this time machine on the stage with computers and everything. And every time we do children's church, once a month, we would bring back a Bible hero through the time machine. And he would come out and he would teach the kids for an hour, and then we'd send them back through the time machine to his time. Of course, this is being creative, being curious all at once here. But when we're talking about surprises, this one month we were talking about David, and we're going to bring boy David, the shepherd, through. And the kids come up and they're pushing the buttons and they're doing all the stuff that they need to do to make the time machine work. And of course we have lights and sound effects and a smoke machine hooked up to it. And when the time comes, the character comes out. But this month we had this huge guy that went to our church. This guy was immense. He was like 6'8". Huge, like an enormous football player. We dressed him up as Goliath. And then when we told the kids we were bringing David through, Goliath comes out and he is like mad. He's like, roar! What's going on? Who are you kids? And he's screaming and yelling and carrying on. And you should have seen the kids' eyes. They were quite paying attention and quite surprised at what was going on. Of course, we played out the whole thing, and the leaders come and they were trying to push Goliath back into the time machine, and of course he's playing along as well. Where's that little guy, David? Oh, I'm gonna get him, whatever. And we finally pushed him into the time machine and finally brought David back out again, and as he was supposed to. But let me tell you, the whole point of this was to catch the kids off guard and to surprise them. And I kid you not, it's been at least 5-8 years since we did that, and I still have those kids, which are now like grown-up teenagers, coming up to us and telling me, remember when Goliath came through the time machine accidentally? Wow, that was awesome. Because they won't forget that when they're surprised. You're reaching a certain part of their brain, which we want to reach, which they'll never forget things. So surprises are a powerful tool that we can use. Another tool that we can use is repetition. Another tool that we can use is repetition. I did that on purpose just to give you an example. You say something twice, you're like, wait a second, what's going on? By repetition, I'm not talking about having to repeat everything twice. I'm talking about building familiarity. For example, we have puppets that we use for our children's ministry stuff, whether it's Sabbath School or the children's story during church or children's church. We've had the same puppets for 20 years. If you guys, some of you parents, watch my weekly Sabbath School video review that I do for the primaries, which you can catch on kidssabbathschoolreview.com, every week we have Dusty and Feather come out, and the kids love Dusty and Feather. This is what I'm talking about for repetition. The kids email me and send me messages on Facebook all the time how much they love Dusty and Feather. This is using repetition in my favor because these puppets come out and they talk about all the animals that God has created. And it's a great way to connect kids, get them excited. They're looking forward to Dusty and Feather. Of course, you can imagine Dusty and Feather are a little goofy and silly, but they always bring the point home and honor God and admire His creations, etc. Use repetition, whether it's puppets or any other feature or teaching moment where they see it coming. They know it's going to happen and they look forward to it. Doing this over and over again is creating like a safe zone for kids because kids feel safer in an environment where there is repetition. So repetition is a big tool. Another tool that we can use is motivation. Motivation. All right, so what am I talking about? Am I going to have to pay kids to do something? No, that's not quite what I'm talking about. And, I'll admit that in many areas, not all areas, this is a controversial issue because what I'm talking about by motivation, let's just give an example. Hey kids, if you know your Sabbath School this week lesson or memory verse this week, we will put a star on the chart. Or we're going to give you a prize if you know all 13 at the end of the quarter, whatever. It's basically giving a prize, a reward for knowing something. I have run into leaders that frown on this practice, and if that's you, that's cool. I'm not trying to push one way or another. I'm just giving options. My experience is that this tool is huge because I've seen it in action where kids are lining up to pronounce their memory verse by memory because they know that they're going to get a prize. But of course, at the end of the day, the goal is for them to know their memory verse and to know them all by the end of the quarter and have those tucked away in their heart to be able to produce at any time. I'm focused on the big goal, which is them knowing their verses. The little goal is, we're giving them a 1-cent bookmark or pencil as a prize or a little star, which is the small picture. Focus on the big picture. If it takes a penny or a 5-cent toy or whatever to motivate them and encourage them, remember, we're training them. You're not going to give them prizes and toys when they're 15 or 30. You're creating habits when they're young to get them excited, to get them motivated, get that exercise, that weekly exercise where they are working towards something. And I mean, really think about it. This is something good that we need to be teaching them for the future. As adults, you are motivated and you work towards something. That is an adult concept. And teaching it as kids, personally, I don't see anything wrong with it, but I toss it out for you guys to use there. If you watch my events, if you've ever seen me when I'm traveling around and touring, every single time I always have my segment called Game Show, which I ask kids questions about something that I just taught, and of course I give them a prize right on the spot. My Kids Sabbath School review, I also do Game Show to ask them where they are, and there's prizes, there's motivation. Big tool to get them to pay attention and to be motivated to learn. Another tool that I want to encourage is to be relevant. And this can be anything. And I'm not trying to pick on anything in particular, but I've heard of parents say that, wow, these are the same felts that we were using, in 1960. I remember this one. Oh, wow, it's still there. I love those felts. I grew up with those felts. I'm not telling you to get rid of your felts, but I am encouraging you guys to think of new ways to connect your kids with possibly more relevant formats, technology. And I'm not telling you to get an iPad for every single one of your kids. I'm simply encouraging you to think outside the box. Think of what these kids are used to. Think of how these kids are connecting with their culture and society. And think of ways that could be more relevant to teach them a point or a lesson. Again, not an attack on felts because I love the felts, but I have been to many churches that they've retired the felts and they're looking and experimenting and taking risks to find new ways to connect their kids. And again, maybe the little kids' felt is still incredibly awesome. Again, please don't get upset by my felt comment. Felts can still be used and be very powerful. I'm simply encouraging you guys to think outside the box, and especially as kids get older, find new, more relevant ways to connect with them. Next tip that I'd like to share is to be memorable, right? I mean, if we're forgetting what we're teaching, what's the point? We have to figure out how to make it memorable. One of the examples that I showed you, of course, is the, David and Goliath thing, the time machine, where they will not forget that. Again, if you've been to one of my events where I teach on the creation topic, and I don't want to be a spoiler or anything, but if you have been, if you're one of those folks that have seen my creation talk, you remember the dog. That's all I have to say, because I've also had people come up to me 10 years later where they're like, Rich, I remember that dog. Boy, did you get me. They still remember the dog. And of course, I don't want to spoil what I do in case you haven't been to the event, and maybe you will see it one of these days. That is an example where you can do things that will be incredibly memorable to the kids that are watching, and adults too. The next tool that I'd like to mention is your choice of Bible translation. I do know, and I am very aware, that there are going to be a lot of people that want to stay with the more traditional, King James version of the Bible. That's great. I'm just providing other options for using the translation specifically for connecting with kids, because it's not a secret that there's a lot of words that are in the King James translation that kids are going to struggle with. And if we're already getting into verses where kids are struggling to understand, aren't we kind of self-defeating ourselves? And I want to give you an example. I'm going to read a random verse out of the Bible. It says, "In thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths." This is obviously a King James translation of that verse. Listen to this version just to compare. "With every step you take, think about what he wants, and he will help you go the right way." It's the exact same verse. But which verse do you think is easier for a typical kid to assimilate and understand and apply in their lives? Again, I'm here to provide tips and tools and ideas. I'm not telling you have to use this version or that version or not use one version. I'm just encouraging you guys to think about using tools that will help the points get in and stay in, and the easiest path in. Not make things harder. We want to make things easier. Next tool that I want to use is to use stories. Kids love stories. Whether it's a story out of the Bible, whether it's a personal story, whether you're reading something out of a book, whatever, stories is a huge way to teach a lesson and a point. Of course, you have to be able to apply the point of the lesson to the story, but stories have a magnificent way of getting kids' attention and keeping the kids' attention. There's just something magical about stories, which is why I love storytelling. I know a lot of you guys have read my devotional book, Passport to Adventure, 365 stories of adventure, of travel around the world. A lot of you guys know about the movie that I produced, The Mysterious Note. It's the same concept, using stories to teach lesson points. I believe stories are powerful, and I apply them in everything I do. So I encourage you guys to consider how to use the stories. It can be used in so many powerful ways. Well, I have a whole bunch of more tools that I'd love to share with you, but we are running out of time. And so I just want to encourage you guys, again, if you are interested in this topic, you are looking for more tools, more information, more tips, more ideas, please pick up this book. It has all of the concepts written in long format for you guys to be able to learn and grow from. If you have any questions, probably the easiest way to find me is on any of the social media platforms. Facebook, I have several pages there, Instagram, TikTok. I'm on all those, so if there's anything that I can do to help, our main website is onemustardseed.com. We run 7 or 8 different ministries under that umbrella, so that is probably the central place to start off if you want to check out some of our other resources and work and ministry areas. I just want to encourage you guys to keep on doing the work that you guys are doing. Thank you so much for your commitment and love for God's children. Take care, and God bless.